season marked a turning point in the sport, blending the last echoes of the 1960s with the emerging professionalism of the 1970s. It was a year dominated by Emerson Fittipaldi, who became the youngest world champion at the time, and by Team Lotus, which returned to form with the sleek and highly effective Lotus 72D. The season opened with a sense of uncertainty. Several teams were still adapting to new safety expectations, and reliability remained a constant challenge. But Lotus quickly established itself as the benchmark. Fittipaldi's calm, precise driving allowed him to convert strong qualifying performances into consistent race-winning pace. Across the year's 12 Grand Prix, the competitive landscape shifted repeatedly. Jackie Stewart, recovering from illness and driving a Tyrrell that was no longer the class of the field, fought hard but could not match Lotus's momentum. Denny Hulme and Peter Revson kept McLaren in the mix. Ferrari, meanwhile, endured a difficult campaign, struggling with both speed and stability. Several races highlighted the season's character: the wet and chaotic Monaco Grand Prix, where strategy mattered as much as bravery; the British Grand Prix at Brands Hatch, which showcased the rising talent of young drivers; and the Italian Grand Prix at Monza, where Fittipaldi's victory effectively sealed his title. Throughout the year, mechanical failures, tire wear, and evolving aerodynamics played as much a role as driver skill. By the end of the season, Fittipaldi had built an unassailable lead through a blend of speed, discipline, and mechanical sympathy. His championship symbolized the arrival of a new generation and confirmed Lotus's mastery of modern F1 design. The 1972 season closed with the sport clearly moving toward greater technical sophistication and a more global identity, setting the stage for the intense battles that would define the mid-1970s.
The Spanish Grand Prix gave Emerson Fittipaldi the chance to demonstrate, in a World Championship event, the superiority he had already shown in the non-championship races held between the South African and Spanish GPs. The was, of course, up against tougher competition. Stewart and the Ferraris had not raced since Chialami, yet Fittipaldi, who took the lead on the 9th lap, was indisputably the strongest driver. The race itself was not particularly exciting, as it was marred by the disparity in tire performance. Not only were Firestone's vastly superior, but the only other cars shod with Goodyears capable of putting up a decent fight were Stewart's Tyrrell and Hulme's McLaren, the two World Championship leaders. Everyone else started with no hope of success. By winning the Grand Prix in Nivelles, Emerson Fittipaldi had already taken a very serious option on the world title. He had everything at his disposal and unquestionably one of the best car of the moment. The second of its advantages was its superior reliability. The John Plaver Special was the only front car which scored points in 4 of the first 5 events that took place. It is equipped with Firestone tires that have still a slight advantage over the Goodyear rivals, less evident in Nivelles than in Jarama. Obviously, Goodyear is working hard to make up for lost time. It must also be forgotten that a good part of the credit must go to the pilot. Emerson combines ardor and maturity. By June 1972, there was a lot of talk about John Player, and it seemed the Model 72 had been rediscovered. Yet it was already in its 3rd season of competition, and its rivals agreed that it was the best car of the moment. It was overlooked the previous year due to Fittipaldi's mediocre results, but people failed to take into account that Colin Chapman had decided to treat 1971 as a learning year for Fittipaldi. Emerson Fittipaldi's Lotus 72 had been modified at the rear from the previous race. The rear wing was now maintained by a structure formed by both the oil tank and the oil cooler. In addition to this important change aerodynamically, the weight has been further lowered by the use of new honeycomb alloy wheels. Fittipaldi won this very hard race, but he ended up with his front left tire punctured and could not have completed one more lap. Emerson Fittipaldi was increasingly pulling away from the pack. Following the British Grand Prix, he held 43 points compared to Jackie Stewart's 27. The Scot had seemed capable of salvaging a situation that had been severely compromised by his absence at Nivelles due to a stomach ulcer. Indeed, his victory at Clermont-Ferrand had put him back in contention. However, it was a case of too little, too late. It was evident that, on equal tires, Fittipaldi's John Player car was the fastest of all current Formula One machines. Stewart's only hope laid in his new 005 model. Unfortunately, after an accident at Charade involving Savert, the car went off the track again during practice at Brands Hatch, this time with Stewart at the wheel, leading Jackie to abandon it. That effectively handed the victory to Fittipaldi, who readily seized the opportunity. But even if the 005 would live up to the Elf Tyrrell team's expectations, it would still face a formidable challenge from Fittipaldi's John Player Lotus, which was modified for every race. At the Italian Grand Prix, Lotus will be severely handicapped by an unexpected incident. On the Tuesday before the event, the truck carrying the race cars of Fittipaldi and Dave Walker was the victim of a serious accident on the motorway leading to Milan. Walker's car was out of order and Fittipaldi's badly damaged. Arriving in Monza, Fittipaldi heard the news and had to go to Chamonix, where the team had left its mule, in a parking lot. He brought this Lotus back to Monza himself.
I remember I was staying with the team in a hotel near the track, in the Monza Park. It was about 10 p.m. one evening when I had to go to reception and pick up the phone because they couldn't understand English in the hotel. It was the Lotus truck driver calling and saying that he had crashed. Couldn't believe it. Here I was, going to the championship decider, and the truck crashes on the freeway, just 60 miles before Milano. And then myself and Peter Waugh drove there. We saw spare parts on the grass, everywhere. The Italians were trying to grab them as souvenirs, and the team was trying to stop them. The race car was badly damaged, and we decided to run the spare, which had a lot of mileage on it. The race itself. I made a good start, and I was running hard behind the Ferraris. I couldn't pass them because they were very quick on the straight.
46th lap. Stupor in the stands, Jackie X returns to the pits in slow motion. A short circuit cut out its battery. Fittipaldi is now riding to victory with a 15-second lead over Halewood. At 25 years, 8 months, and 29 days, Emerson Fittipaldi becomes the youngest world champion in the history of Formula One. He was also the first Brazilian to win this title and immediately became an idol in his country.
My father was broadcasting the race on Brazilian radio, and he was very emotionally involved. Can you imagine a journalist broadcasting his son winning the World Championship? It was a very special moment for me and my family.
É o Emerson Fittipaldi, campeão mundial de automobilismo, vai ingressar na reta de chegada. E atenção, aí vem o vencedor da competição. É o Brasil ganhando o Campeonato Mundial de Automobilismo. Venceu Emerson Fittipaldi, venceu o Brasil, minha gente. Vitória incontestável do automobilismo brasileiro. Venceu o Brasil, minha gente.
From the first World Championship in 1950 until 1973, car numbers were not controlled by the FIA. Each race promoter decided the numbers for their event. There was no universal rule, and practices varied from country to country. In 1973, the FIA still had no fixed numbering system. It would adopt it the following year, in 1974. In 1973, Lotus, being the reigning constructors champion and having the reigning drivers champion Fittipaldi, simply requested and received numbers 1 and 2 for the whole season. This was custom, not regulation. Finally, Fittipaldi carried number 1 twice in 1972, once at Clermont-Ferrand, once in a non-championship race at Vallelunga. If the 1972 Lotus Policar model matches one event, it must then be the French race held on July 2nd.